Yo, guys, welcome back again today. Today we're going to be talking about the legendary, extra legendary Bass Reeves, which is a U.S. Marshal deputy. Bass Reeves was born in Crawford County, Arkansas in 1838. It is unclear if Reeves was the first African-American U.S. Marshal lawman in the country, but his story is nonetheless extraordinary. Born a slave, Bass Reeves would receive two names, one from the state and one from his owner, in which owned Reeves as property. His owner's name was William Still Reeves. His first name, Bass, would come from his grandfather, Bass Washington. Soon after, William Reeves would move to Grayson County, Texas in 1846 and took Bass Reeves with him. He would work for a blacksmith as an apprentice in his new home state. He also worked as a stable boy at a local location within Grayson. After some time, Bass Reeves would be transferred to his owner's son, George Reeves, where he continued to be enslaved and used as a servant boy. This was around the American Civil War, and George Reeves would become high-ranking in Texas politics and eventually served in the Civil War between the South and the North. George Reeves would go on to become a colonel in the Confederate Southern Army. Bass Reeves would follow George Reeves into many battles in the Civil War. Bass Reeves states he was in three major wars in the Civil War: the Battle of Pea Ridge in 1862, the Battle of Chickamauga in 1863, and Missionary Ridge in 1863. It is confirmed that Bass Reeves fought in the Battle of Pea Ridge, in which the Confederate lost to the North. The other two battles are unclear if he did fight in them or not. Being military trained, brave, and soon to be free would lead the legend we know as Bass Reeves. Soon after the Pea Ridge Battle of 1862, Bass would punch and attack his owner, then quickly fleeing to Indian Territory. This Indian Territory was in what is now the modern states of Oklahoma and Kansas. Being a fugitive slave, Bass would seek refuge in the Indian Territory with the Seminole and Creek Indians. While living in these territories, he would learn the Muskogee language and become fluent in it. Bass would also try to learn other languages within the territories as well. He would pick up other languages from other tribes. It is not known for sure, but Bass is thought to have joined a union made up of free and runaway slaves, as well as other tribes, to fight the Confederate Army and other tribes which supported them. Soon after, the 13th Amendment and the abolishment of slavery in 1863 would make Bass a free man. We must note, even though laws may pass, this does not mean everyone follows them, especially around the time they are first passed. Being black and free still had ramifications on how whites treated, perceived, and interacted with African Americans. Bass would move close to Van Buren, Arkansas soon after and marry Nellie Jenny. He and Nellie would go on to have 10 children. His wife was from Texas, and the couple would go on to have 5 girls and 5 boys, and even split. Bass would go on to farm and live in the area till around 1875. Many laws and amendments would be passed over time, such as the 15th Amendment. Bass would soon come into a new job. Fate, his experience on the Indian Territories, and Army experience would all make the legend we know of as Bass Reeves. One part of the Indian Territory in Kansas was so unlawful, so dangerous, that people who traveled through it could lose their life over food, clothing, hats, women, or anything in between. Most would not venture there, especially from the east, but Bass's time in the territory made him feel right at home there. Bass also had great relationships with the tribes in the territory. He could also speak multiple tribal languages, and this was all soon recognized by the U.S. Marshal within the Van Buren, Arkansas area. The U.S. Marshal saw him as a very valuable person, and when going on an expedition into tribal territory, they would take Bass with them as a middleman. The U.S. Marshals were created in 1789 by the first United States Congress. Their job was to enforce and support the federal courts, also to support the president, and local courts obtaining fugitives and outlaws. The U.S. Marshals also did many jobs for their politicians, such as collecting money, bringing food and water to politicians during cases, and making sure witnesses were on time for court. These U.S. Marshals could also appoint deputies, which aided in the capture of outlaws. West of the Mississippi River at the time was still very, very wild, hence the name the Wild West. Majority of deputies and U.S. Marshals were killed in the Wild West. These were very even times when it came to the law and outlaws. Many local, federal, and anything in between, as far as law enforcement, were killed or killing outlaws at an even scale. This was a very, very dangerous time. A new judge would be appointed by the U.S. government to oversee the Indian Territory in Kansas and Oklahoma. Isaac Parker became judge in 1875 and would be known as the hanging judge. He would appoint James F. Fagan, U.S. Marshal, to appoint 200 U.S. Marshal deputies to help clean up the territory. He would make Bass a U.S. Marshal deputy soon after. This would start the legend and fear of the U.S. Marshal known as Bass Reeves. Many outlaw cowboys would shake in fear at his name. Once after an outlaw, Bass would use creative, tactical, and unorthodox ways to catch an outlaw. Moving as a black man at the time would help aid in disguise in certain areas. Bass was 6'2" with a strong stance, confident eyes, and aim that many could only dream to rival. His time in the Army taught Reeves how to shoot with precision and discipline. His time as a blacksmith made him strong and able to make many items that would aid his trips. This man was a well-rounded human who possessed many skills an average person did and still do not have to this day. What made Bass so impressive is Bass was illiterate. He remembered all wanted posters and court orders by memory alone. From 1875 to 1907, Bass made 3,000 arrests. What's even more interesting is that Bass did not always go in guns blazing. Bass had amazing detective skills and used his skills acquired throughout his life to contain criminals without confrontation. Some accounts say Bass would use clues to inch closer to outlaws whom other U.S. Marshals could never get close to. Bass was also feared because one minute you could be alone as an outlaw, and the next, Bass would be behind you or standing over you in your bed. Bass would also kill 14 criminals and got into shooting standoffs with outlaws, in which 2 times his hat got shot off. Some of these occasions happened in very planned ways. 2 brothers acted as tour guides and tricked Bass into letting them guide him through the unknown lands. Once at a tavern, he had put 2 and 2 together that these men were actually outlaws trying to fool him. He went on to kill both of them in the tavern after one of the brothers tried to pull a gun on him secretively. Another time, the famous 3 outlaw brothers, or Brunner brothers, would sneak attack Bass and held him at gunpoint. Bass would use the distraction of laughter to kill 2 of the brothers and take the 3rd brother in. Bass would do this by stating to the brothers that he wanted to know the date. The brothers asked why, and Bass stated he wanted to know so he could put the dates on their prison papers. 2 brothers then laughed out loud. Bass took his split second to draw a 6-shooter and killed 2 of the brothers while shooting the 3rd to obtain him. Truly, speed was his best friend. Bass would collect many rewards. One reward he collected from bringing in outlaws was $5,500. In today's money, that would be around 122,000 American dollars. This is more than what most people in America make in 1 year. Everything wasn't easy though. White Americans who still did not accept a black marshal would let Reeves know many times. In one occasion, Bass told U.S. prisoners to straighten up while being transported, but a white marshal would not like this and went into a standoff with Bass. Luckily, this shootout did not happen due to another marshal stepping in the way. Bass, being a man of the law, even went after his own son, Benjamin Reeves, in which Benjamin Reeves killed his wife. Many U.S. Marshals thought Bass should not take it due to it being his son, but in a room of U.S. Marshals, Bass said, "Give me the writ." He headed out to obtain his own son. He did, and delivered his own son to the federal court. His son was tried, sentenced, and imprisoned for life, though his son was eventually freed for being a good prisoner and stated he would never do a crime again. Bass was even so lawful, he went and arrested his own pastor. Unfortunately, in 1884, Bass would be stripped of his badge and tried for killing a camp chef. A former Confederate would take over the office and reverse Bass's verdict, which he was found not guilty. This would last for 3 months, even with witnesses saying Bass accidentally shot the cook while cleaning out a cartridge that was not working. This would take all the money Bass had in his home to fight this case. After clearing his name up, he would go back to being a U.S. Marshal. Bass was close to the end of his career, with the United States conquering the West and making all of the remaining Wild West states of America. This would make the modern-day United States of America. In 1909, Reeves would retire, and 2 years before that, he would serve as a local Muskogee police. He would die in 1910 from Bright disease, which is a kidney condition. His only master at the end was his duty. So yo guys, today we learned about Bass Reeves, which is one of the most legendary, if not most legendary, U.S. Marshals to ever exist. There's way more on Bass Reeves. There's way more to his life. Of course, I had to condense it because I had to make a video that was palatable and wasn't super duper long. But you can definitely look more into Bass Reeves. His life was very long. He did so many different things. He went after so many different outlaws. I think if you made a video about it, it might be more than an hour long, maybe. But nonetheless, we now know about Bass Reeves. Bass Reeves is actually a very amazing character, actually a very interesting character. If you haven't watched the new movie that is called The Harder They Fall, he actually plays a character in that movie. And that movie doesn't actually do historical facts about each individual character, but all the characters on there were actually real black cowboys or real lawmen. So yo guys, until next time, please like and subscribe, turn on your bell notifications so you'll always get all my updates. Add me on all social medias, which is Afric Network, which is Instagram, Twitter, SoundCloud, Snapchat, and Facebook. Each one teach one. Always love each other, always learn from each other. And yo guys, until next time, watch out, outlaws. Peace. One love.